everyone to a brand new episode of Death by Misadventure. Flying, traversing the sky with or without purpose. Regardless of whether our dreams of flight are steeped with deep intent, or we imagine soaring aimlessly through a blanket of clouds or skimming along the surface of expansive oceans. Fantasies of flight have most likely occupied a corner of the human brain ever since we developed the capacity to imagine, to wonder. Visions of effortlessly floating through the upper atmosphere or even through the vault of heaven in a way that no bird can, gliding without propulsion, with only the impetus of our brain. It could only be the wish of an animal that would be destined to hunger for more than evolution had granted it. The weightlessness, the majesty, our body becoming omnipotent, immortal, becoming God. Then, the feeling of satisfaction, the accomplishment of mastering the airy blue and existing in a realm that never anticipated the presence of primates. What a thrill. If flying is triumph, then falling is torture, torment, tribulation. Falling brings no swell of delight in our dreams, but instead a kind of sinking horror associated with loss of control, with the terror of our mortal body making violent contact with terra firma, with death, and perhaps with a moment, no matter how brief, of inconceivable pain that might even annihilate our very soul. This is a story about a dream turned nightmare. The joys of flight never for a moment enter this arena. This is a story about a plunge, a rapid descent toward death, driven only by free will and faith. Not faith in any deity, but a bumptious faith in oneself. A story about the choices one man made despite the foreshadowing, the writing on the wall, the warning signals, and countless harbingers of his own demise. If an omnipotent deity did indeed exist, but had staunchly adhered to its own promise to never interfere with the will of humankind, it certainly wasn't for lack of trying that such a god did all in its power to, at the very least, alert its precious creation of the mistake he was about to make. This is the story of the fatal plummet of Franz Karl Reichelt. While little is known about Franz's early life, what is known is that he was Austro-Hungarian, born in 1878 in a place called the Kingdom of Bohemia, a medieval and early modern monarchy in Central Europe, which was also the predecessor state of the modern Czech Republic. His childhood is lost to time, but 20 years later, in 1898, Franz packed up, decided to take a chance, and see what adventures a new life in a new land would bring him. A life in Paris, France. This would be Franz's first gamble that we know of with his own future, and thus the wrecking ball of fate was set in motion. After spending enough time in Paris to be sure that this was the land of opportunity for him, Franz obtained French nationality in 1909 and had even decided to francophonize his birth title by adopting the name Francois. Did our Franz have lovers? Perhaps. Do we know who they were? No, never was there a mention by anyone he knew about his personal life. What we do know is that he was unmarried, childless, and we know of his interests, which eventually blossomed into obsessions. Not only was our Franz a lover of the smartly outfitted form, but he was also a tailor so skilled, in fact, creating garments from his third-floor apartment near Avenue de l'Opéra, that he was able to launch a successful dressmaking business catering predominantly to Austrians who were holidaying in Paris. But somewhere down Franz's prosperous road, a small path caught his eye, one not overly traveled, and thus one is driven to ponder the natural state of man, which is to never remain idle for long, no matter how successful he may become. Nothing is ever enough. We must achieve more, acquire more, be admired more, validated more. Franz developed a fixation. After absorbing several news stories about fatal tragedies among the early aviators and aeronauts of the time, Franz's ears perked. It was on this less traveled path that he began to believe that aviators, pilots of the day, faced unnecessary risks, and that he was the man to make their profession, of which he knew nothing about, safer. This triggered an interest within him to delve into the world of parachute design, but not your standard run-of-the-mill parachutes that were bundles of fabric separate from the pilots, bundles which had already been created and were functioning perfectly well. No, Franz believed that he could do better, and so he began to sketch out the plans for a parachute suit, which, from this moment on, shall be named a parasuit, for convenience. I mean, our man was a tailor, how hard could it be? And he continued to tailor away, of course, but a dream had taken hold, and now, with his Austrian clients, he was known only to talk about one thing: parachutes, specifically his parasuit. Parachutes could successfully be strapped on and deployed if pilots had to escape their plane at great heights, and fixed canopy parachutes, which were already open before the jump began, were highly successful. But by 1910, no parachute had yet to be created for use in jumping from lower altitudes. If a pilot had to abandon their aircraft mid-air, nothing could save them from the impact because there wouldn't be enough air between them and the ground for their parachute to fully deploy. And thus, Franz's parasuit was born. He wanted to create a suit that wouldn't be bulkier than the suits all aviators of the time were wearing, but he knew that he wanted to create a canopy combined with rubber and rods that would enable his suit to unfold like a set of bat wings, combined with a fluttering awning that would gently carry its cargo to the ground. He wanted to use waterproof material in combination with the use of silk, revered for its strength and lightweight, which was also the parachute material of choice at the time. So his experimentation began. Prototypes came and went, and failure chewed at the heels of his every design. But he was relentless in his pioneering parasuiting pursuits. Interestingly, apparently the caretaker for Franz's building noted that Franz did have some early success, which might very well have kept his flame burning. She recalled mannequins fitted with silk wings being tossed from the building's 5th story, but no other testimony exists that could corroborate her assessment. Franz's experiments surged on. His original designs used 65 square feet of fabric and weighed 150 pounds, quite a weight to be added to the body of a free-falling low-altitude pilot careening toward Earth at breakneck speed with gravity pulling at him like an ocean vortex. Yet Franz knew his design would be a success, despite his persistent defeats, which he repeatedly ignored. His confidence was so great, in fact, that he presented his design to the leading aeronautic organization at Aero Club de France, hoping that they would test it. But private failures soon became public when they rejected his prototypes on the ground that his fixed canopy was too flimsy, with his rubber and his rods and its silk and belts. They strongly suggested that he spend no more time on the further development of such designs, and that anyone who used his contraption would surely break their neck. Foreshadowing? Oh, no, never. Haters gonna hate, right? What would they know, these so-called leading minds of aeronautic design? Certainly not what our Franz knew. This rejection was just the thing to drive Franz forward with even greater confidence. All of this hoo-ha unfurled in 1910, and Franz had no shortage of ideas, nor was the strength of his conviction dampened in any significant way. Our man plowed on, and in 1911 a certain Colonel Lalance contacted Aero Club de France, yes, the same club that rejected France's previous magnum opus, and the colonel offered an astonishing 10,000 francs to anyone who could design a new safety parachute for aviators, doubling the prize that he had presented the year before. Now, this competition would be open for 3 years, but the only rule was that the parachute could not weigh more than 55 pounds. To be clear, that was 100 pounds less than Franz's design. But that was it? The only stipulation? Easy peasy chicken squeezy, thought Franz, I'm sure. And so he raced back to his silks, his rubber, his rods, and his belts to redefine his nearly perfect design, simply reducing its weight and increasing the surface area of the material, and success was won. Wait, what was that? His tests were still unsuccessful? And his test dummies still fell like leaden anvils to the earth? Oh my. Well, this competition wouldn't be for France. Not this one. Not this time. But undeterred, Franz felt he knew what the problem was, and he knew exactly how to fix it. Right. That's right. That's all. Clearly, the malfunctioning parachute batsuit could be remedied if deployed from a higher test platform. Naturally, it was the height that was surely lacking. Funny thing about that, the entire point of Franz's design was to have the parachute safely deploy and function at a lower altitude. The fact that he felt he needed far more height in order for his design to work, it should have been a sign. But the third sign? The 9th? The 40th sign for Franz to stop and think. Stop and revisit the old drawing board. Or, maybe just to stop. But oh no, stopping wasn't an option now. The roller coaster of fervent ingenuity had ripped free of its tracks and was now airborne. In his mind, there was only one direction to go in his wax-wing suit. And that was, of course, toward the blistering sun. Franz was on fire, not literally. He was burning with the passion of creativity and blind faith. Faith in what? We don't know because it was blind. Up until this point, few of Franz's designs provided him with any indication that he would succeed. So where did this egotism, this hubris, this earnest conviction come from? Was he crazed, mentally unsound? Did he feel a kind of self-imposed pressure, perhaps, to push forward in order to prove to the endless mass of naysayers that he was indeed the genius who held the key? Who can really say? But he felt one structure, and one structure alone, held the ticket to his success. The Eiffel Tower. He was hell-bent and determined to share his invention with the whole world, and it should be noted that there were earlier reports of Franz personally jumping from heights of 26 to 33 feet while using his contraptions. That's right, he didn't use a dummy. He also didn't succeed, but luckily, landing in a hefty mound of straw cushioned his fall the first time, but another paper reported Franz leaping from 26 feet in another location in France. Alas, this grand flail resulted in a broken leg. No pain, no gain, though, right? But back to the Eiffel Tower. There were reports in 1911 that Franz had applied for permission to toss his bat-winged dummies from the first deck of the Eiffel Tower, but his efforts were denied and denied again. That is, until he apparently received official authorization in 1912 from the Paris Police Prefecture for his final performance, what he believed would be his crowning achievement, which was to conduct a spectacular experiment from the Eiffel Tower to demonstrate, without doubt, the true value of his elegant invention. And such an invention did indeed have the power to change lives, just far fewer than Franz had imagined. The day Franz's world stood still. The day finally arrived. This was the moment of truth. The day our man had been waiting for many, many years. Sunday, February 4th, 1912. A wintry day, a gusty day. What a day to be alive. What a day to make history. And here is where the following events become harried, confused, where certain newspapers have been fed one story and the police have been given another, where certain friends believed one event would take place while others were convinced something entirely different would unfold. Was this harried confusion orchestrated by Franz himself, so that he might get his way come hell or high water, or were tangled miscommunications an organic occurrence, which ended up becoming the launch pad for what was to come? Something we should have done at the very beginning of this story is tally up the continuous omens that arose but were brazenly ignored by Franz. But it's too late for that. We're dangling over the precipice now, teetering on a tightrope, so let's start counting the warning signs now. The 4 tokens. The red flags. Flag 1. It was a positively frigid morning, stabbing like a deluge of stitching awls, puncturing every inhalation. Time. 7 a.m. Bright and early, Franz arrives at the Eiffel Tower by car with 2 close friends. He's already donning his parachute. And before he begins his long climb, he models his invention proudly before the photographers in its folded form. Reporting says, the suit doesn't restrict the wearer's movements at all when the parachute is packed on the person's body. It is only slightly more voluminous than ordinary clothing. That's our Franz, ever the tailor, never one to sacrifice fashion for functionality, of course. And what did Franz have to say? My new invention is like nothing else. It's constructed basically half in waterproof fabric and half in silk, and thanks to a system of rods and belts that one can control, the parachute suit deploys during a fall and will save a person's life. A pilot's life. Another news report states, the method of deploying this parachute is as simple as extending the arms out to form a cross with the body. Once extended, the outfit resembles a sort of cloak, fitted with a vast hood of silk. What else did Franz have to say? I want to try the experiment myself, and without trickery, as I intend to prove the worth of my invention. Red flag number 2. Franz's friends and many others who have assembled to witness this spectacle plead with Franz, attempting to dissuade him from making the jump. One comrade voices his concerns about the parachute, needing a longer amount of time to fully open than the drop from the first platform, which would only last a few short seconds. Flag number 3. The same friend presents further very sound technical objections, attempting to appeal to whatever shreds of logic might still be clinging to Franz's brain, somewhere, to which Franz cannot provide a satisfactory response, except, you are going to see how my 72 kilos and my parachute will give your arguments the most decisive of denials. Red flag number 4. Another parachutist present warns Franz that his parachute will not have enough time to deploy. Apparently, since Franz's arrival at the Eiffel Tower, he had made it clear it was his intention to carry out the jump himself without the use of dummies, but in later interviews, the same friends who ascended the tower with Franz claimed they were all utterly shocked that he had planned on doing this himself, because he had apparently concealed his intent until the very last moment. Now, I find this curious, and it isn't passing the sniff test, because it was these very friends whom he had discussed his intent with before the ascent, and he mentioned nothing of dummies to them then. Nobody had even seen dummies present anywhere that might be used. If his friends were claiming to be shocked that at the last moment Franz revealed that he himself would be jumping, then why push so hard, so long before the jump to dissuade him from carrying out the experiment if they believed that he had planned on using dummies? Perhaps his friends were attempting to cover there so they didn't catch any charges for having not alerted the Paris police prefecture of Franz's unhinged plans. Red flag number 5. This is what I mean by confusion. Certain articles claim that his friends tried desperately to get Franz to use dummies, encouraging him that other opportunities would arise where he would be able to make the jump himself. Red flag number 6. These warnings failed to make Franz think twice, and so his companions made loud observations about the strength of the wind and suggested he call the test off on safety grounds, or at least delay until the wind dissipated. But nothing would break his focus or crack his resolve. And now, today, right this very moment, Franz gives no thought to all of his past failures and tells journalists, "I am thoroughly convinced that my apparatus will not only work, but work well. And no, I will not be taking any precautions. I will not be using a safety rope. I intend to trust my life entirely to my parachute." So again, it appears Franz is clearly declaring that he himself will be taking the jump. More confusion. Le Matin News notes that Franz's determination to jump is causing ripples of trepidation throughout the crowd, implying that everyone there seems to know he plans to propel himself from the Eiffel Tower and won't be using a dummy. Why else would he be modeling his own suit that day and discussing his test as if he would be the guinea pig? Fall from hubris. Red flag number 7. As Franz approaches the Eiffel Tower on this gusty, frozen, bleak winter morning, his entry is blocked by a guard named Gassion. One paper reported that this guard, incredibly, had witnessed Franz's previous unsuccessful dummy drops and believed that his attempt would end in complete and utter disaster, while another report stated that Gassion had simply not received a copy of the order required, allowing Franz to pass into the tower and up to the platform. And all present were forced, in turn, to wait for telephone confirmation from Gassion's superiors to allow them all to pass. Let's count that as red flag number 8, because regardless of whether the former or the latter is true, both would have given pause to the entire nightmare. Both would have provided Franz with the opportunity to turn around. Both would have stopped him dead in his tracks, at least for one pregnant moment or two. But by 8 a.m., the order comes through, the matter is resolved, whatever that matter happened to be, and Franz carries on toward his destiny. Although, according to his friends, he was visibly shaken by this holdup, by this altercation with this guard who refused to let him pass. So it did give him pause, but not enough to swallow his pride and turn back. Franz is now allowed to enter the tower with his 2 friends and 1 cinematographer who will film him from the platform, while another stations himself at the foot of the tower to record the jump from below. And so it begins. Ropes are tied between the soaring legs of the Eiffel Tower by police, at Franz's insistence, to prevent what he imagines will be an ocean of people threatening to spill into the landing zone, and so he lengthily discusses his plans with the marshals, expressing his great need for sufficient space for his landing. But only an impoverished clump of 30 journalists and onlookers have assembled to bear witness to this bizarre spectacle on an otherwise unremarkable winter's morning. 327 steps to the first floor. Franz begins his ascent slowly in his parachute, up the tower's stairs toward the first platform, the platform that would deliver his long-awaited victory. His modest crew follow along behind him solemnly. Franz, pausing for a moment, turns back to his audience. He raises his hand and wishes them a lively and carefree "à bientôt." Biting gusts swirl as Franz enters the platform. It's a desolate, icy place where I imagine the vacuum of wind is muffling all sound from below, perhaps even sounds from across the platform itself. He readies himself, climbing up onto a stool placed on top of a restaurant table next to the interior guardrail. Franz is 187 feet off the ground, billowing in the sky. He turns toward the River Seine and adjusts his contraption with the help of his friends. We can only imagine what they're feeling in this moment, a moment where one or both could easily tackle Franz to the ground or knock him out, possessed with an unexpected feral need to save someone they care so deeply for from himself. Did such thoughts cross their mind that vicious morning as the minutes wound down? If they did, none acted. Red flag number 9. In a moment of complete and utter absurdity that perfectly showcases the sophistication of Franz's unequivocally scientific, empirical mind, he checks the direction of the wind by whimsically tearing a piece of paper from a small book and flicking it into the whipping heavens. What a strange act. What was Franz thinking when he did that? Red flag and final flag number 10. Our man places one foot onto the guardrail and hesitates. To be inside of Franz's mind at this very moment, he doesn't hesitate for several seconds, for 10 seconds, or 15 seconds, not even 20 long seconds. Franz hesitates for 40 excruciating seconds. But it was recorded that in that moment before he leapt, He was calm, and he was smiling. The aftermath. This ghastly event was covered by every French newspaper across the nation, and reporters dashed to release their stories like rabid racing greyhounds. Every paper was filled with illustrated stories about the death of the reckless inventor who was named the Flying Tailor, and his death plummet was shown in newsreel after newsreel. Reporters described the gut-sinking moment when onlookers knew something had immediately gone wrong. They described the mangled mess of brown silk and shattered bones left in the aftermath. When it comes to aviation, aren't we all used to audacity and to surprise? As if he sensed his horrible fate, the doomed inventor hesitated a long time before jumping into the air. Among the spectators, 'twas only he who seemed happy. Everyone else believed he would kill himself. 2 seconds later, in a pitiful wreck, he lay on the icy grass. He fell and landed almost standing. Blood trickled through his mouth, nose, and ears. His right arm and leg were crushed. His skull and back were broken. Death was instant. Reichelt dropped like a stone. Franz's cherished parachute, which seemed to only partially deploy, flew up and folded around him as he shot to the earth, enveloping him almost instantly as the short seconds spun before he struck ground as frozen as granite at the foot of the tower. It was reported that his right leg and arm were indeed crushed, his skull and spine cracked and broken. He was bleeding from his mouth, nose, and ears, and his eyes were fixed wide, dilated. Our Franz was certainly dead upon impact, but onlookers rushed to his body hoping, before what was left of him was whisked away to the nearest hospital, where he was officially pronounced dead. Astonishingly, an autopsy concluded that Franz had died of a heart attack mid-plummet. Could it be? I don't know. But as reported, film of his attempt, including footage of his body being removed, was distributed by news organizations widely, and onlookers were recorded pouring in after his body's removal to measure the depth of the crater his body left behind. The citizens of France were disturbed, enraged. How could the police allow a man to do such a thing to himself? Surely they knew of his previous failed attempts. If the police were present and had roped off the tower to provide adequate space for Franz's landing and had given him permission to proceed, it was surely they who must be held responsible for his death, for they had paved his way to it. But the police's response to the public outcry was similar to Franz's friends, oddly. The prefect of police issued a statement expressing that while the police routinely give permission for experimentation to be performed from the Eiffel Tower, it was understood that dummies exclusively would be used. They claimed they had given permission in Franz's case on the basis that he would be conducting dummy drops. Under no circumstances would they have ever allowed him to proceed if they had known that he would be making the jump himself. The head of the police was clear to say no order was ever signed allowing a live jump. So did Franz lie to his friends and present his grand reveal at the last moment? Did Franz lie to the police? I just can't believe it, considering the way the onlookers, journalists, photographers, and his friends were acting before he plummeted to his death. It seems everybody knew. Did the police know as well? and in finding themselves in hot water prefer to feign ignorance in order to have the entire fiasco brushed under the rug, in order to have their reputations preserved. Considering what we've all learned by now about the institution of policing, anything is possible. Now, there were reports speculating on Franz's state of mind. Many called him reckless, foolish, but none had thought him mentally unwell or filled with a desire to remove himself from the planet. One of Franz's friends mentioned that he had felt stressed under the pressure to provide a dramatic demonstration in order to attract sponsors he needed so that he could make a profit before any patent expired. Was this true? We don't know. We can't know. But what we do know is that on February 2nd, 1912, just 2 days before Franz's fatal jump, American steeplejack Frederick R. Law had successfully parachuted from the viewing platform of the Statue of Liberty's torch, which towered 223 feet above sea level and soared 151 feet up from the base of the statue. Not only did Frederick R. Law achieve this incredible feat using his parachute and live to see another day, he apparently propelled himself from the torch's platform on a whim. Could this have been the final sign Franz needed to follow through with his dream if he had been having second thoughts? Mightn't this act have infused him with a new injection of unwavering faith and steadfastness in what he believed to be his own gifted abilities? Did Franz think, if Frederick can do it, so can I? Or was he frantic with a sense of urgency to not be left behind in a race of his own making? I don't know. What I do know is that Franz was born in a place called the Kingdom of Bohemia. And Bohemian, as a noun, is defined as being socially unconventional. It's an expression used to describe one who is involved in the arts, a nonconformist, avant-garde, offbeat. And I can't think of a better way, quite honestly, to describe or define Franz Karl Reichelt. Franz might have been drawn to France for its creativity, its flair, and its passion, but he himself was the embodiment of these very traits, and it was evident that he carried them all within himself. I don't know if I'm entirely sold on the concept of fate, destiny, or a course of predetermined events. And I'll never know if Franz's dream was compelled by a feverish desire to improve the world or to just be revered for having changed the world. But I know that whatever lured him to France was far too powerful for Franz to resist. Perhaps Franz felt it, knew it, even before he left, and never had the intention of resisting it in the first place. There couldn't be a more appropriate time for this Charles Bukowski quote. There's a long list of creators who embody these words, and Franz Karl Reichelt, I believe, deserves his place among them. My dear, find what you love and let it kill you. Let it drain you of your all. Let it cling onto your back and weigh you down into eventual nothingness. Let it kill you and let it devour your remains, for all things will kill you, both slowly and fastly, but it is much better to be killed by a lover. As always, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you'd like to see more of these videos, because I'll be releasing a new one every Friday. Looking forward to chatting with you in the comments below. And never forget, the choices we make could prematurely lead to the last breath we take. So, choose carefully. And remember, one thorn of experience is worth a whole wilderness of warning.